everyone, it's Laura from Divine Light Yoga. Today I'm sharing with you how to incorporate storytelling into your yoga classes. There's a few different ways that you can incorporate stories and myths into children's yoga and yoga for teens. But today I'm just going to focus on how you can incorporate the movement, the asana, the yoga poses into stories. Now, firstly, it's important to choose a story or a myth that you know well, that you connect with, and that has some sort of underlying moral or theme that is related to yoga philosophy fundamentals. So there are many books out there, even some young children's picture books that have that kind of underlying yoga philosophy theme. So once you've chosen your story, you feel very confident and comfortable with the story, you know the story well, then you can start building your sequence. It's very important for the children that the yoga sequence that follows the story has some fluidity and flow to it, so that you're not moving up and down, standing and seated and lying down, and it can feel very disjointed, confusing. And if the movement doesn't make sense, then it's very difficult for them to comprehend the story, and then it's much more difficult for them to really take away that moral or the theme of the story. So making sure that the movement flows as the story flows. So if you're not familiar with how to build your own vinyasa or your own fluid sequence, stick to a sequence that you know, so maybe the sun salutations or the moon salutations, and just keep that as your base for the story flow, and add a couple of variations of the poses. So it may be that you have a particular pose that represents one character in the story. So let's say you're choosing Hindu myth, and you choose the story of Shiva, King or Lord Shiva, and his pose is often represented as Warrior 1 or Warrior 2. So it might be that every time you talk about Shiva and his actions and his character and what he did within the story, that you return back to your Warrior 1. And then as the story goes on, maybe Shiva is moving, he's doing whatever he is doing in the story, you're moving through your sequence of sun salutation or moon salutations. So you're having the poses to represent different characters and different actions within the story. So the second thing that you really need to think about is how you're going to balance alignment cues and telling the children how to get in and out of the poses with telling the story fluidly. So slowing down your sequence, getting the children to hold the poses for longer, is a great way to be able to balance that. So moving through your sequence, so it might be that your downward facing dog, your plank and your cobra is the time when you're really focusing on alignment cues and the breath, and then again coming back to your Warrior 1, moving into your Warrior 2 is when you're telling the story. So don't be afraid to go at a slow pace. It's really good for the children to slow down a little bit, be more mindful and aware of the movements and the breath, but also it's really great to set that slow pace so that they're still comprehending the story. And just checking in with the children throughout as you tell the story, asking them questions, and what do you think happened next? And what do you think this was? And how do you think he felt? So just asking those questions to check in with the children, checking their understanding, and also giving them that opportunity to express their ideas, their opinions, and the feelings towards this story. So once you've figured out your sequence and which poses you're going to use, you've thought about how you're going to balance the alignment cues of coming in and out of the poses alongside fluidly telling the story. Also think about which poses you are going to stay in to tell the story. So it's very difficult to speak whilst you're in a downward facing dog. So whilst a downward facing dog might be a wonderful representation of a mountain or a volcano or some animal within your story, it's very difficult for you to maintain that pose and continue to tell the story. It's also very difficult for the children to hear you if you're in a downward facing dog, because your voice can't project out. So really focusing on which are the best poses to stay in to tell the story. So again, standing poses, mountain, warrior poses, avoiding any back bends while speaking, any inversions where it's very difficult to project your voice. So they're three very, very important things to think about. And then lastly, I would encourage you to weave in a relaxation at the end of your story. So ending in a pose such as child's pose, simple seated position, or even a shavasana, and then leading a nice relaxation, some sort of self-inquiry meditation, especially if it's for teens, that relates to the story. So they've been able to move through the story, going on this journey. You've been checking in with their comprehension. They've been able to express their ideas and their feelings towards the story. And then finally coming down and giving them the opportunity to really understand what that story was about. What is the deeper meaning? What is the moral of the story? And just doing that through some sort of self-inquiry meditation, or just a little bit of time to reflect on the meaning behind that story. Of course, it's very important not only for you to know the story, but for you to know why you're introducing this particular story or myth to the children in your class. How does it relate to what it is that you really want to teach them? Does it relate to yoga philosophy and what we're trying to encourage children to learn and share and be within our yoga classes? Well, thank you so much for listening, and I do look forward to hearing all about which stories you like to use, which particular myths or books you like to use in your yoga classes, and just let us know underneath this video blog how your yoga storytelling and your yoga journeys are going with your children and teens. Namaste.